Welcome to the Mamas at Work podcast with your host, me, Heather Rose. I'm so excited you're here and I hope you're ready to learn because I have some amazing women coming on to this podcast to talk all about entrepreneurship and being a mom and how we handle it all and juggle it all and maybe even balance. I love to talk about people's passions and find out what makes them excited about what they do and hopefully help the rest of us feel not so alone. So let's get going. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Mamas at Work podcast with your host, Heather Rose. I have with me today Kim Marsh, and she is the owner and founder of the Open Book Company, where she helps people become authors. And I have to tell you, I have actually been doing some audiobook recording, and one of the books I've been recording is about self-publishing and actually getting into that world. It's fascinating. And so I was really excited to talk to you about this. So thank you, Kim. I'm so excited you're on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing, your kiddo, everything.
Sure. So here's the rundown. So as you said, I am the founder of the Open Book Company. I just launched the Open Book Company at the end of 2021. So relatively new business. And prior to doing my own thing and starting my own business, I was in the corporate world. So I began my career way back a million years ago in the education nonprofit space. I've spent a little bit of time there. And then for the last 8-9 years or so, I was in corporate in financial services doing HR and diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And the timing of my departure was certainly aligned with a lot of women leaving the workforce in terms of the great resignation, the great reawakening, whatever right. You want to call it. But it actually wasn't solely because of that. The timing just happened to align, but I was trying to figure out and looking for my next thing for a couple of years before we even experienced the pandemic. So at the end of 2020, decided to launch my own business. And I was very unlike many other entrepreneurs in that I didn't have this specific, hey, I'm going to take this wild leap and go do this thing. I knew what I didn't want to be doing. And I had this vague sort of sense of what I wanted to be doing, which involved writing and helping people tell their stories, but I didn't exactly know what that meant or what it looked like. And so when I first began on my own, I was doing freelance writing, and my clients really kind of held a mirror up to me and showed me through what they were asking for and what they wanted, what value I could provide and where I was, adding the most service to what they needed. So I think I spent about a minute doing actual freelance writing and cold pitching and everything that I thought I was going to be doing when I jumped out on my own. And then pretty quickly, people started coming to me and through referrals and asking, hey, your thing is that you help people tell their stories. Could you help me with my bio? Could you help me with my resume? Could you help me with this? Oh yeah, I can do that. Okay, How about my blog and these articles for LinkedIn? Could you help with that? I'm like, yeah, I could help with that. And then I had this very pivotal turning point for me, which was early on during that time when I was navigating what space I was going to be playing in and sort of taking things on and figuring it out, where someone who's now my closest friend, but at the time was an acquaintance, her name is Tina Strawn. And when she found out that I was kind of going off on my own, doing this writing thing and helping people tell their stories thing, air quotes, she was like, hey, I'm actually writing a book. Would you be interested in being my writing coach? And I was like, yes. And then I was like, what's a writing coach? And that was over a year ago. And so through working with Tina and navigating that space with her and learning on the job what a writing coach was, and taking on more clients and getting more experience and kind of building up that muscle, I then launched the open book company at the end of last year because things had kind of all come together. And I realized this is really my purpose in the space that I'm meant to be playing in, is helping people to tell their story. And in this way, that I don't believe that you need to have a spot on a global stage or a major book deal or a PhD in English literature to have a story worth telling. And so now through one-on-one coaching and then also group writing circles and workshops, I help people to put their words out into the world. And so that's why I say I wasn't one of those, hey, here's this thing, I'm going to take this leap because I know I'm meant to do this. I kind of was a little bit in the in the figuring it out along the way stage. And that's brought me to where I am today. And you did ask about being a mom, which I do have to mention as well. So I do have an 8-year-old kiddo, and that's just a little bit about what keeps me busy these days.
No, that's fantastic because I kind of did a similar thing, like I went into virtual assistant a little bit to learn everything, right? Because a virtual assistant kind of just does anything, and then I was able to figure out, oh, okay, this is what I love to do. But I'm really interested, like, how did you get into the writing? Because it doesn't sound like your corporate job is really about that.
So it's interesting. I've always kind of considered myself a writer, and this is actually something that I work with my clients on a lot. So it's sort of like a little spoiler alert here. 25% of what I work on with my clients actually has to do with writing, by the way. So we can talk about that a little bit. The rest of it, the 75%, it's all about mindset. It's all about all of the things that come up, the imposter syndrome, do I have anything unique to say? Will anyone want to read this? Like all of those things. That's really the bulk of the coaching that I do. And then, like the writing comes along with that part of it. Right. So I say that, but so I've always considered myself a writer since I was, in 3rd grade and had my little colorful diary with a lock on it that I would I would capture what I was doing every day, all the boring things like what I ate for lunch, or I don't know. I still have them back in this closet behind me, actually. So I've always considered myself a writer and like a chronicler of like events and things going on, but more personal writing and personal essays. And it's always just been kind of a seed that was planted in the back of my head, but that because of a lot of the messages that we get, myself and a lot of my clients, didn't really see that as a path or something that could even be a part of my journey necessarily. And so it was just something that I did for myself. And that was how I looked at it for many years. And when I was in corporate and I was doing the diversity, equity, and inclusion work, one of the things that I did get to take on was a lot of communications. And so I was helping to write memos and articles and all different content for that subject matter, but it kind of brought forward that passion again and that love of words and storytelling again. And another very interesting informal role that I would play, I was the person on my team who people would come to and say, hey, could you read this email? Does it get across what I wanted to get across? And does it tell what I wanted to say? And how do you think the person's going to respond? And I just loved kind of helping people take like what their end result was and what their goal was and what they were trying to accomplish and help them to navigate and find the words to be able to get there. And that all has just translated really nicely into helping people tell their story, whether memoir, all kinds of nonfiction, business, you name it, blog posts, articles, full-length manuscripts. There's so much that is rattling around in people's minds that they want to share with the world. And sometimes all we need is just someone saying, hey, come along with me. And I'm here with you for the ride to be able to do that. So it's an honor for me to be able to stand alongside people on that journey with them.
Oh, I love that you say that. And I love that you have that, you said what, 25% is about the writing, 75% is about like the mindset and the blocks that we have in our head. Because I think if we didn't have those mindset issues, pretty much everybody could write, right? You could
Yeah.
figure it out. You could get an editor to write your grant, like all that stuff. You could just sit down and write a book if you didn't have all those issues going swimming around in your head. And that's why writers coaches are so important, because like you said, those people have amazing things to say, right? They have stories. They have something that is going to touch somebody else, that is going to help somebody else as well, or even just themselves getting it out on paper is, I think, completely cathartic. So
Yeah.
writers coaches are just amazing that they can just bring that out of people.
No, well, it's lovely to hear you say that. And I completely agree. And I love what you emphasize, that it's about their story, because I say this to my clients. Like, I run some writing circles and I do some free workshops, and the top 3 things to know before you write your nonfiction book and all of that. And there are so many things out there, how to become a New York Times bestseller, or, take this course and you can, sell 1 million copies of your book. And I am not saying that some of those courses aren't legitimate. I'm sure there are. And if you and I sat down together, we could probably map out exactly
Right.
what those steps are to make that happen for someone. But the way that I kind of look at it is, you could have the 10 steps in front of you to be able to get to that, sell 1 million copies of your book or get to the top of the bestseller list. But 9 of those 10 steps could feel totally inauthentic to you and who you are as a person and how you want to show up as a writer and how you want to express yourself. And so, my clients write amazing things. They go on to do amazing things. They share amazing words, but you won't see on my website, I've coached this person to get to this place and this person to do this, because that's their accomplishments. That's not me.
Yeah.
I'm the coach. I'm on the sidelines cheering them on, right? Helping them with the strategy, helping them figure out the best play for them, looking at the different options that they can take. But it's them. They're in the driver's seat. And so to me, it is about, as you said, the essence is their story and them getting an opportunity in a way that's authentic to them, in a way that helps them reach whatever goal or impact they have in their minds, in their hearts, to be able to do that. And that's what's truly amazing, because not everyone, we don't all have the same goals or the same desires when it comes to our writing. So what I try to do is help people figure out what those goals are, what their impact can be, and where they want to take it. And to your point, it could be just for them, like the one person they impact with their writing could be themselves, and that's enough if that's their goal and their aspiration. And then to help them say, okay, now that you have that in mind and you know where you want to go and what you want to do, what is a good next step for you? And maybe that's where some of those other courses that I will never teach come into play, right? So it's about coming back to that starting point and that intention setting that I think is really important. And just as I said, an honor for me to be able to help my clients to identify that and to support them.
Yeah. Because, I have a similar, I work with people who want to build their podcasts, right? And they want to tell their story. And it's kind of similar in a way that they could only be, helping themselves, getting these thoughts out, and it's interesting because that whole like becoming a New York Times bestseller, that's not always everybody's goal. I mean, sure, it would probably be nice, if you wrote a book and you're like, oh my gosh, I guess I'm a bestseller now. That would be fantastic. But like, that's not always the goal. Like, I work with people who just want to reach the people that they want to talk to. I work with people who just want to talk to this one person, and that's really all that matters. And so it's fantastic that you really hone in on that and help do you have clients come to you who are like, oh, I want to be a bestseller, but after you've worked with them for a while, they're like, actually, these are just the people I want to talk to?
It's funny. I'm laughing because I think by now people know not that they don't come to me if that is
they're like, yeah, she's not the one to get me there.
If that is their goal. And like, that's cool. Like, I'll direct you to someone else who can. And by the way, it's not to say that we couldn't get you there. But we have to identify if that's your goal. It's the reason I'm kind of chuckling to myself is because everything you're saying, like, there is this big gray area. I talk about this all the time. The gray area between being a New York Times bestselling author and never putting a word out into the world. There's a huge gray area in between. And that's where I like to play with people. I actually, I introduce myself sometimes as, hey, I'm Kim. I'm not a New York Times bestselling author, but I'm still a worthwhile human.
You put that in your bio. That totally made me laugh this morning.
And I bet you are too, right? Because we have this, and also this can apply to all aspects of our business, by the way, right? It's like you see this quote unquote successful business person, entrepreneur, and what they're doing, and you have that, okay, that's never going to be me. And so then you don't even take one step forward. Or you have like, oh, that this person is running, such and such course with X number of people attending. That's never going to be me. So I'm not even going to take this one step. The reason I can speak to this is because I live it. I'm doing it. It's not like I've overcome this, this thing that plagues us so much. But I think what I've now recognized very beautifully through helping a lot of my clients through it is in talking to them, I talk to myself. And it's this reminder that, yeah, there's this big gray area. Number one, that might not even be everyone's goal. So we're busy, knocking ourselves down and not taking a step forward when we're looking at someone who's not even doing something that's exactly what we want to be doing. So that's why I always do start with that intention. So people have that place to come back to and that sort of like safe space when they start getting influenced by all of these other things. So yeah, to answer your original question, I would say, I think I've sort of almost, but it's been the MO of like, hey, if you actually don't care about becoming a bestseller, go work with Kim, because that's not what we're about here. We're about, you don't need these accolades and you don't need these things. Like you said, yeah, if that's a cherry on top, that would be nice. But we all know that the best selling books are not actually the best written books, right? It's about marketing and it's a lot of other things. And it's not to take away from those bestsellers. I read New York Times bestsellers all the time. And many of them are great. So it's not to knock those. It's about there can be another way. And that's sort of like the same thing with my business too. It's like, there are people who went to school and have major certifications and have, spent decades in traditional literary and publishing worlds. And we need those people. I admire those people. I learn a lot from those people. And I want those people to still keep doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
And there can be another way and there can be another path. And that's the path that I'm following. And so that's kind of the same way that I talk to the people who come into my orbit. It's like, just because we're not an X box as it relates to your writing doesn't mean that you can't play over here in this box with me. So we have fun and we work through all the things, the writer's block, the imposter syndrome, all of those things together. And that's really what it's about, because writing is a very solitary process. And some people love that it is, and other people want to be in community and be able to share their story. And that's where something like a writing coach or a writing group can come in and be beneficial for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, what kind of clients do you work with? Are you mostly with like business owners who are wanting to, promote their business through a book? Do you work with fiction authors? Like, are you pretty broad or do you have a pretty specific niche?
So when it comes to one-on-one coaching that I do, it's much more targeted nonfiction. I have some, as you said, entrepreneurs, business owners who want to talk about their business, their mission, their strategies, their tactics, and what they do within their business and with their clients through a book. So that is one audience. But to be completely honest, the vast majority of people that currently are working with me and that have come into my orbit, and I think this is like a magnet that I've sort of put out, is people who have a story they want to tell related to some sort of grief or trauma or healing process that they have gone through and experienced, and want to share that with other people and share the messages and the lessons that they've learned through those experiences with other people. And that's where I said too, 25% is the writing, because a lot of space is held with my clients for the story itself. A lot of people, when they think about, okay, here's a book coach or here's a writing coach, it's getting down to the tactics and like, okay, how do we publish this thing, and and that's part of it, right? Mm-hmm. So I help clients to get it down. I help clients to edit, refine. I help clients to identify the goal and what they want to accomplish. I help them through the self-publishing process, or talking about the different options when it comes to publishing. So that's on paper, the technical aspects of a writing book coach and what I do. But that to me is actually such a small fragment of the work that I do with individuals and with my clients, because you cannot separate the work and the story from the person and the experience. And so we have to hold that together, and we have to navigate that together. And that's why I say really, truly is an honor, because I'm at times sitting with people, they're sharing a story with me that maybe no one in the world has ever even heard yet, because this book or this blog post or this article series hasn't come to fruition yet. And I take that very seriously. And that to me is one of the greatest honors of doing this. So I do work on, the business strategy and helping you to promote your business through your book, and some of those reasons that a lot of small business owners and entrepreneurs want to get content out into the world. But more and more, I'm finding that even people who are in that situation and who that is their initial goal, once they start refining like what their intention is and what message they want to share, it ends up getting a lot deeper than that, because we can't separate ourselves from our business. It's just like who we are. Yeah. So it's really beautiful. And I also I'm talking about my one-on-one clients a lot, but I would be remiss not to mention, because you asked about fiction. So I also run these writing circles where people can come and have a space to do their writing. This is what I found. This is why I started them. So the same 2 challenges would come up with all of my one-on-one clients, no matter how experienced they were with writing, how long they'd been writing, whether they had a traditional book deal, whether they were starting with a blank sheet of paper and didn't even know where to begin. Across that entire spectrum, the same 2 challenges kept coming up for people. One was carving out the time to write. So like having the accountability and like putting something in your calendar and then actually sticking to it because of all the other things going on and the competing priorities in their day. And then the second thing, which we have talked about already, was the mindset stuff. So all of the writer's block, the can I do it? Hasn't this already been written before? Who wants to read my story? Like you name it. Those 2 things kept coming up again and again. So I started these writing circles as a way to address both of those challenges for people. So now if you sign up for these writing circles, it's like you have this dedicated time on your calendar. You are going. Kim's expecting you. Everyone else is expecting you. And it's a super low pressure situation, because I know for myself, I was very intimidated at the idea of joining writing groups, because I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I have to write this thing that I'm feeling. And I know at the end of this 2 hours, I'm going to have to read this and other people are going to comment on it and criticize it. And it was just very intimidating. So in the writing circles that I run, we actually don't share our writing at all. I've actually started getting people saying, can we start sharing now? So I'm going to do separate sessions for that.
There you go.
But it's not the purpose. The purpose is for you to have the space to be in community, to work through with other people what are your challenges, and then have that time for yourself. So I have people in the writing circle. So yes, fiction, novels, People do their gratitude journals. I had someone writing their wedding vows in one of the writing
Oh
circles
my
a couple
gosh.
weeks ago. So those are spaces where it's like anything goes, come as you are, and you're welcome to just be you, show up as you, and dedicate that time to your writing and to your expression.
That's really special. I think that's really amazing that you were able to create that kind of space for people where, that doesn't happen naturally.
It doesn't. And I will say too that it's hard for me to even say like that I've created the space, because yes, I made the space, I set up the call, right? So technically I've made the space, but it's so this co-created, beautiful thing that what's really amazing to me, because I am in all of them, is to see the different energy that they take on depending on who's in the sessions, what they're working on, what challenges they're bringing up, the things that they want advice or input on. And each little hour and a half time just becomes its own little mini, like beautiful little world that
Yeah.
we can kind of be together in. And I love that, because it is completely a co-creation of and evolves based on the folks who are participating and who are showing up. So it's a beautiful thing, and I'm honored to be a part of it. I love my community. There are such amazing, amazing people.
I love that. And you can really tell in the way you speak about it, like how much you care about these people and how much you care about that space. And I love that, because that really shows, when you talk to your clients and when you talk to those people in your groups, that you are there because you really do care about this. And I
Thank
think,
you.
yeah, and that's really special, because that doesn't happen very often. Especially, I've noticed, especially in the entrepreneur world, you can really, find people who say they care, but it doesn't really seem like it. So that's really special. But I want to ask also, because my audience is, young mom entrepreneurs, probably just starting out on businesses and everything. And since you kind of started a little different, kind of like I did, like, is there any advice you would give them over getting started, especially if they don't know exactly where they thought it was going to be?
So this is a great question. And the reason that I pause at this question is because I sort of have, I don't want to say maybe some unconventional advice, but I think anyone listening to your podcast already has the advice that they need that has been given to them, right? They're listening, they've heard your story, they've heard the other guests before me, they're probably listening to other podcasts, reading other blogs, reading other articles. And so my advice to them would actually be like, don't listen to me and what advice I have, because I think that inside of them, I am dead serious. I know you're laughing at me. I think inside of them, they actually know. I think they know what the advice that's come before that's resonated with them. And my advice would be to actually take time away from all the stuff. And I'm not advising people don't listen to your podcast, because I do, and it's great. But after you've listened, then what? Are you journaling about it? Are you reflecting on it? Are you making that time to close that door? Because it's hard for us to do that, but to close that door, to just sit and reflect and think, because I could give all the advice in the world, but everyone's story is unique. Everyone's path is unique. And it would be easy for me to say, on the one hand, don't worry about, your finances, it'll all come together. And then the next day I could say, make sure you have a backup plan, because you need to have the everything in place and the budget in place and this. And then the next day I could say, all right, so here's what happened for me. And it's all based on my journey and like what I've experienced. So I don't want to do anyone a disservice by telling them the Kim way, because that was a roll of the dice. And what ended up happening for me happened. And there's been downs, there's been ups, there's been more downs, and there's been ups, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. But what I feel really confident in is that the places where I feel the most proud and the most quote unquote accomplished, not in the traditional sense or the societal sense of the word, any decision that led to those points was one I made that was authentic to me and who I am and the decision that I wanted to make at that time, and not with external pressure, expectation, or taking on somebody else's storyline. And so that's what I would actually encourage people to do, is take it all in, listen to the podcast, attend the workshops, do all of that. But what's sitting in your heart, and what's the thing that's resonating with you when people are talking, and play there a little bit and start taking that path and see how it feels for you. Because we're all just figuring it out. So we all need to just listen to each other and then listen to our hearts, because none of us, I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but
no, I don't know what I'm doing. No, I love that. Because I think we have so much content to consume, right? We have so many people we could listen to, so many blogs we could read, everything we could consume to the point where we never actually get anywhere. So I love that you say, like, take a minute, take a breath, just like, I think that's brilliant, because it can be really hard to do, because you're like, there's so many smart people out there, and and I'm not saying stop listening to my podcast, but if that's what you need to do, stop listening to my podcast and actually go out and do it for yourself, right? Like, figure out what's in your heart. And then
come back and be a guest on your podcast.
Yes, please. I think that is an incredible point to end on, actually, because that is exactly what this is about. This is why I have all these different people on this podcast, right? Because they all have amazing points of view and amazing brains and wisdom about all of this stuff. I learn so much during every interview, and I love it so much. And for those of you listening, this is actually going to be my last recording before summer starts, so I can actually spend time with my kiddos. And so I think this is the perfect one to end it on, because I'm going to be doing that. I'm going to be taking a break and listening to my heart. And so I encourage all of you to do that. This will not air until September, but all of you just take a beat. And you've heard the things that you need to hear. So you need to start trusting yourself. Oh, this was so good. I'm always like, I don't know why, I'm always surprised with an interview. Not that like it's going so well, but that like, I'm like, I did not know this is where this would go.
That's the beauty of your genuine curiosity, right? You don't come with this prescribed plan and this and, a template to follow. You show up and you're curious, and that's where the magic happens. So I'm honored to be on the other side of it. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here, Kim. I want people to, when they're ready to be done taking a break, where do they find you and how do they hook up with you, especially if they're wanting to write?
Sure. So the best place would be to hop onto my website, which is www.openbookco.com. And right at the top, there'll be a link that you can hop onto my newsletter and get all the updates around workshops that I'll be running, or ways to get in touch, and writing tips and things like that. So that's really the best way to stay in touch. I also am reluctantly on Instagram at The Open Book Company, and you can find me there. Send me a direct message. I spend way more time in the DMs than actually scrolling through. So I love to hear from people. Please follow and send me a message, and I'd love to connect with you. So that's the best way.
Oh, thank you so much, Kim. I really appreciate this.
This is great. So great to spend time with you. And I hope you enjoy your summer with your kiddos.
Thank you for joining me for today's Mamas at Work podcast. I am so glad you were here, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did and learned a lot, because I know I always do. Please join me at my Mamas at Work Facebook group, where we will be talking about the women that are on this podcast, and you can sign up to be a guest on the podcast as well if you would like to. Thank you so much. See you next Friday.